So Stephen, we're going to start right back at the very beginning. You
Yes.
started off as a developer, and this was something that you self-taught. Can you start off by telling us what your slightly unconventional path to development was?
I grew up on a property west of Charters Towers. My parents had cattle and horses and things like that. So my dad had got into that after he left. He went to Vietnam as an electrical engineer and he was building machines all the time. And he got into collecting computers and stuff like that. He loved to tear them apart and put them back together and see how they worked, but he didn't program. And I remember when I was about 10 saying, what do we do with these things? And he said, I think they program them. And so I started programming when I was about 10. In about 1981, I started programming. And in those days, it was, early. And my parents were very kind. They were able to, I remember being about 10, they took me along to this bulletin board meetup thing for Commodore 64 user club. And they were just packed with old nerds. It was really freaky. And they let me stay there. It was bizarre. I went to a college, a boarding school there in Charters Towers. I came down and studied medicine at University of Queensland. I did that for 2 years and then I dropped out and got a job programming. And I went for I can't remember who got me the connection, but I went along for a job interview as a programmer, quite nervous, and quickly worked out the guy interviewing me didn't know anything. And then I was there for a while and I became a programmer. And then from the age of about 20 until I was 35, I'd worked in banks, in agencies, all different jobs as a programmer, effectively. Team leader, product guy, but they weren't terms then. And
you got into web development, and I guess during that time you were telling me that you made quite a few valuable connections that were then
helpful later in life.
Yeah.
So I would always felt like I was on the wrong side. I went through the .com boom at a company called F5, and there's some F5ers here, I think. Dale's here. People who worked with us, and Dale's know them. A very successful web design company. I was part of that, but we were on the wrong side. We were on the right side. We made lots of money, but we never. It was crazy time. .com 1998 to 2001, and I'd always wanted to do a startup, and I never did. I was always on the other side, building for other people, and
And then you came about building something for yourself, which again was, I suppose, not part of the plan initially. So tell us about Plugger.
So Plugger started because I was never able to hold down a job and work anywhere. I never lasted longer than 2 years anywhere that I'd worked, and I became frustrated and always take a year off and go and do other things, which was not much, but I would teach myself stuff. And when I met my wife and we had our first child, I realised that I'd wasted the last 15 years of my life, that I hadn't really achieved much, and I had an okay job, but I wasn't earning much money, and we were quite stressed because we had our first child coming and we had a mortgage and all those things I'm sure people are familiar with here. And my wife was really into stock trading. I saw she was continually on the line reading about the stock market before she was trading in the morning. We only had a little bit of money and she was trading. And I said to her, I could automate that for you. And she said, oh, can you? And I built this thing called Plugger, which was like Google News before Google News came. Essentially, it ingested as much news as it could from all these different sources, Australian only, and it would then try and work out which companies and which people were active overnight and which stocks. And it became moderately successful. It was the most successful thing I'd ever done. And I'd built 1,000 websites for 1,000 companies, and they'd all been kind of crap. And this one kind of took off and surprised me. And then Scott Moorhead, who's here, introduced me to. We'd been friends. We worked together at a marketing company, and John may be here too, who was my boss there. And he said to me, Graham Wood's leaving What If. He's been there. They've listed, very successful company. He's done very well. He was transitioning to a chairman or maybe out of chairman. He was looking to do something new and wanted to invest in startups. And for some reason, Scott thought of me, and we had lunch and we hit it off instantly. It was a turning point in my life, my family. We hit it off instantly. It was like he was from Rocky and he was from cattle and he was a programmer, and it was like he was like me, but he was really successful. And we just kind of really clicked. And he said that right then that we should be in business together, and I can help you and you can help me, and that was it. And so I know
that he invested then into Plugger.
Yeah, he went overseas, he came back. It took about 3 weeks, but yeah, he did.
3 weeks, that's not bad.
Yeah, that's right. I feel sorry for the startups because obviously I understand the pain of runway and all that, but I've never had to go through the stress until I went to New York. I never had to go through the stress of raising. And Graham was the perfect investor, as you could hope for, that he is completely honest. He understands the risk. He'd been there before. He was, everything you could hope for an investor, he was it. And he was our mentor and our guide all the way through that process. So Plugger, he rebranded What News, as Graham does, as in he has What Yacht and What Opera and What If and What News. And looking back, he had an agenda where he since has invested heavily in news. He tried to do the Global Mail, and then he invested to bring the Guardian here to Australia. He believes in the plurality of news. We're too right-wing in our news, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know then, but that was his agenda behind sponsoring me and my team. But it was awesome for me because he gave us more money than I dreamed of and said, get the best people you've ever worked with together. So I was able to phone guys I'd worked with and knew. You know when you work in heaps of jobs and you remember people and you think, if I could have that person, that person, that person, will be great. And I was able to make that call. And everybody came. Everyone I asked all joined. Hey, this guy's just given us some money. Can you come along? And they did. And so Richard Slatter, who's still at Twitter, and Michael Doherty, who's still at Twitter, and that all left. Richard particularly, because we were such good friends at F5 with Dale, and he'd left. I managed to pull him out of Deloitte in Sydney, where he had an awesome job. And I said, this is our shot. We talked about this 10 years ago. This is it. Come and and as it happened, it turned out okay.
Great. So I suppose from having then What News, tell us about where We Are Hunted kind of came from after that.
So What News ticked over. We got to about 400,000 users, and What News was Plugger revamped. 3 or 4 engineers working full-time on it for 2 years. Became kind of popular. There was a real milestone for us when we won I don't even know if they're still on now, but they had these Internet Awards in 2005, 6, Telstra thing, and it was us and ABC and Fairfax and News Limited, and we won, and no one in our team could believe it, that we'd beaten these sites that were clearly better than ours. But it was kind of the judges said that we were the only ones who were trying to innovate. So it was a big turning point for us, and then on the back of that, we were able to make money for the first time, which was a very novel idea to us. So we licensed the tech to Macquarie Bank, and they started to use it inside their trading desk to inform the traders in the morning what everybody was talking about overnight in a summary form. I went to your event, the Interactive Minds event. I sat on a panel with a guy called Nick Crocker, who was talking about music stuff, and I was talking about tech stuff, I suppose. Yeah. And the panel was fine, but then at the bar he came up to me and said...
The panel was awesome.
The panel was amazing. He came up to me at the bar and said, that stuff where you're kind of analysing news to find out what's cool, can you do that in music? And I said, yeah, probably, not knowing, but sure. And he then explained the problem he had. He'd been consulting at EMI, and EMI's problem was, which turned out to be my next 7 years journey of the industry's completely collapsing. The way that we value artists is by record sales, which is difficult because people aren't selling records anymore. So we don't know what's popular anymore. And I said, well, why is that a problem? Because most of the artists make a lot of money through sponsorships with brands, and the way that brands like Pepsi work out how much to give an artist is how many records they sell. So because all these young, cool artists aren't selling any music, we don't know how much money to give them. Can you work out for me who are really the hottest new artists in the world? And so we worked out that the problem was, could we work out what the most stolen music in the world was? So we built a torrent tracker thing over the course of a weekend, and it was kind of a weird situation because we didn't tell our board, we didn't tell anyone. Me and a developer, I actually hired a third-party developer to do it, and I didn't even tell my other guys because we were very focused on what we were doing, and it just seemed like a lark kind of thing. But something about it felt right, like it felt easy. And we launched it and it went crazy. Like all the dreams you have ever had if you work in our space, that you'll build something and someone will give a shit at a global level. I woke up on a Friday morning to TechCrunch, Wired, email crazy, investors, nutsbag. It was just a crazy day. And everybody just was shocked that people responded the way they did. And it all happened because Billboard wrote TechCrunch, which was the product hunt of its day, perhaps in those days, 2009-ish. They said they wrote the perfect article, and it was, this is the billboard of the new generation. And then they told this whole angle of, oh, that's a good idea. Like, That's better than what we were thinking.
And you said that they didn't know at that stage who was behind We Are Hunted.
No, because we had no connection who'd done it, because the only thing I knew about the music industry was that they sued every tech company who moved. So that's why I didn't tell any of the board or anything. So here we are on a day, and I woke up with 400,000 users in the first morning, and all this press and all these emails bombarding the anonymous We Are Hunted email address, not knowing what to do. And Nick and Ben Johnson from Joseph Mark, who was the design company who we worked with to build it, they didn't know what to do. They'd never seen anything like this, and none of us had. And I had to go to the board and say, this thing's blowing up. And when I went to the board and said this, they didn't want a piece of it. They wanted nothing to do with it. They were not angry, but it wasn't a very comfortable conversation.
And that was primarily because of the threat in the industry.
Yeah, so when labels sue music sites, they sue them, the board, everybody, and they take their life savings. And there'd been horror stories throughout from Napster until there's a queue of them. So my board was very upset about the whole thing. So we didn't shut it down, but we just left it go, and we didn't do anything. And so for about 18 months, we never touched it. Until I remember Ben Novakovic said to me one day, do you keep an eye on Hunted at all? And not really. And then we looked, and it had gone past. He said, you should, because it's gone past What News for the first time. And it was at 600,000 users. And this was a site that no one had touched in 18 months. And it continued to grow. And because we'd lied to ourselves the whole time that the labels would kill us if we identify ourselves who's doing this. But we didn't know. It was a complete accident. We'd built up this enigma around who it is. Who's doing this? How does this work? Which company's involved with this? And the labels, and it became this kind of cool thing in New York. And then I got approached by MTV out of the blue at the info app saying, whoever this is, can you come to New York? And I'd never left Australia, so I thought this is in for a penny, in for a pound thing here. And I got on a plane, and they flew me to New York, and I got to New York, and they met me at the airport in a limo, and they took me to Times Square and to MTV's offices, and I met the president of MTV, and he was straight away, as soon as I walked in, there was a crowd of about 30 people, and they all asked for my autograph, and it was very strange, very strange day I didn't expect it at all. And they were just uber fans, so those people, because remember Ben was going through the data all the time, and we had crazy stats, like we were doing, like the average time on site was like 12 hours, like people were just hitting play, and that's it. And we'd worked out, we're a radio station of cool new music that updated every hour, that had the hottest new stuff. It's a very cool radio station. And MTV went nuts, and then I had a series of random craziness with MTV, and then they said, why are you doing this? Why are you not promoting it and investing in it? And I said, because they'll kill me, And he said, no, they love you. You're huge stars over at Sony. I'm going to take you there now. And I was like, I didn't know anything about Sony except that they were the people who sued everyone. Yeah. And I went to Sony with the guy from MTV, and it was the same deal. And so, I don't know, to me it was this lesson that we just lied to ourselves for 18 months, and we hadn't checked. We hadn't actually proven. We had these assumptions that we'd never actually tested.
What happened with the team at that stage? Because obviously you had the What News team, and then you'd worked with some other people on We Are Hunted, and how did that all work out?
We switched gears instantly. What News died that day, and Hunted took off that day. All of our tech moved. I remember going back to this hotel somewhere in, where was I? Somewhere in Soho. And I phoned Richard and said, that's it, this is Hunted now. Cancel everything, change that, forget that, do this. We're stars here. You get on a plane, man. This is crazy. and he was like, what? What are you talking about? And then I called a board meeting, told them everything's cool. I spoke to the president of Sony, and Graham's like, you spoke to who? The president of Sony. He's happy. He loves us. We're fans. And so we packed up our lives and we all moved to New York. Well, Richard and I moved to New York, and the plan was to move the company at some point. So we moved to New York because that's where the music industry is. And we were, at this point, no one in Brisbane knew us, and no one cared. And that was fine. But it was a surreal change of life to go from there to being in this music bubble.
And what was the plan when you moved to New York at that point?
We had no plan at any point. Our plan was to survive. So
you're saying you don't need a plan?
No, we never had a plan. We didn't have a plan. Our plan was to somehow, our plan was pretty basic. Our plan was, if we could build in hindsight, it's a pretty lame plan. But the plan was, if we could build a really strong tech team and we could be the best in the world at what this thing does, and I remember going to the board and saying this, and then I said, then someone like Google or Twitter or Facebook will buy us because we're the best in the world at this. And they all went, yeah, sure. I remember when I said that at the board meeting thinking, that's not a very good plan. And I didn't dream that a year later that would actually happen.
So what was the kind of on-the-ground plan when you got to New York? You moved over with your families. What did you...
Raise money. We'd run out of money.
Yep.
Graham was out. So we hit this point where we ran out of money about a week after we got to New York. I had my family. I remember my family at that point was crazy. I had a 3-month-old and a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and we arrived in the middle of winter into New York, and my wife was thinking, what are we doing? And then I had to tell her, we haven't got any money left. So Richard and I had to work out how to be fun.
It got really cold and icy at that point, I bet.
Yes, what are we doing? But she was just, she's a goer. She thought it was an adventure too, and she went along for the ride. To us, we'd never been anywhere or done anything adventurous, and that was half the fun. And it felt like a ride, and it felt like an adventure. And we'd already have been so happy having the independence of our own lifestyle and having the ride that anything was going to be cream, whatever happened. So we all went with our eyes open. It was the same thing. Graham, at that point, that stuff went on. He didn't want to reinvest because he's a good investor. He saw that we'd spent millions and had no answer to the exit sign. So I was in New York to raise money. So Richard and I did what I'm sure you guys do if you go overseas, try and raise from Yanks and see how good you go with that. It's a tough thing to try and do. So I was doing that in New York. If you're going to raise money in the music industry in New York, LA, New York's the place to be. I had a site with 4 million users who people loved, and it was really hard to raise money. Really hard to raise money. Because I was in the music industry. The only meme that investors knew was, isn't that dead? Aren't they dead? Isn't the music industry dead? So I never raised money.
You then proceeded to, I suppose, make arrangements and get close with a number of different companies in that process to raise.
That's right.
And you're looking to associate yourself with someone who would ultimately buy the site.
Yeah, so our targets were music companies who were about to list. So we really targeted Spotify, and I became friends with Daniel Ek, who runs Spotify, and another guy called Jim Lucchese, who runs the Echo Nest. And the Echo Nest, at that point, were our biggest competitor. They were doing what we did. We became experts at analysing social media data and other data to identify music trends. So what was the hottest, coolest stuff? And that's what we obsessed about at a technical level. And our biggest competitor, the Echo Nest out of Boston, MIT, they'd raised $30 million. They had all these professors, blah, 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 and they were kicking our ass was the meme. But they were in a different space. We were cool and they weren't cool because they were out of MIT and all this. And they Jim was our biggest competitor, and he became my best friend in New York, which I was really surprised by. But it turned out that we had a lot in common. He was trying to get out too, and he was under much more stress than me. He had 80 people, he'd raised 30 million, he couldn't find the door either. So we ended up, even though we were direct competitors, we ended up helping each other raise and helping each other exit. And he helped me sell to Twitter, and I helped him sell to Spotify. And he sold to Spotify for 120 million or something. And so they all got out. And now he runs M&A at Spotify. Right. And Spotify were a huge game changer for us. When they launched in the US, they asked us to be their launch partner. And I was on stage with Daniel in New York when they launched they wanted to be cool. They thought we were cool. I know I don't look cool, but our site was cool. And that we doubled traffic in 2 weeks. So partnerships, we would have done 10 partnerships with companies over the time, and all of them were garbage. But that one changed the company completely, and we went double traffic, and every American who was into music knew who we were. Yeah. So that also triggered the Twitter link. Yeah,
so tell us how the Twitter deal then came about.
So I was trying to raise money in New York. I was trying to raise $10 million. I did it, eventually, after 6 months of trying.
And you were working on other jobs at this point?
Yeah, so the way we survived is we built the new Sony site, we built MTV's website, we built iOS apps, we did anything in music, which was very easy for us to win, and we were able to charge crazy money for it because they all thought we were the best.
So as you sold your web development skills effectively
yes,
at that point?
That's right.
Yeah.
And Owen was working for me right at the end. There was a group of people who worked for us then. And yeah, we were able to charge great money for building music sites because everyone loved our site and they just wanted the same kind of touch. And we were 6 guys or 7 or whatever, so we were nothing like the teams they had. They would invite us to think I could bring the whole team, and they would have 50 project managers in rooms, and we were just very different. So,
so sorry, then I cut you off then. So Twitter then?
Yeah, so I had a crazy week. I was about to raise money. I had to go. Our lawyers were looking at the stuff. Graham was back involved again, very excited. He was, not going to let these Yanks steal it, that type of thing. And then on a Friday afternoon, I was supposed to go in and sign the contracts Monday morning. I got a phone call on Friday afternoon from a guy called Kevin Thau, who said, "Big Hunted fan, can we meet? Can we have a chat?" And I blew him off, not interested. He said, "I'm from Twitter," and I said, "I'm not interested," because I'd raised, and also I'd had several bad experiences with Microsoft and Google up until that point, who I'd danced with in acquisition talks, and then they'd turned out a site that looked remarkably like We Are Hunted within 3 months. And I thought, this is how this works. They're just trying to work out how we do what we do so that they can do it. And so I just bumped this guy completely, and I didn't think of the second thing. And then on Monday morning, I was on my way to Soho to meet Josh and the lawyers to sign this contract, which I was incredibly excited about. And I had new plans, and Hunter was going to take over the world and all this stuff. And then this Kevin guy phones me and says, "I'm in Soho, can we have breakfast?" And I went, "That's strange, aren't you in San Francisco?" He goes, "I was, but I'm in New York today." And I thought, I'll Google this guy. And Kevin Thor, head of acquisitions, Twitter. Shit, should have took that call. But as it turned out, it made me look like I was playing hard to get. But we went and had breakfast in Soho. Sat down, and the first thing he said was, "Massive Hunted fan. What I want to do is I want to buy Twitter, I want to buy Hunted, and I want your team to come and work for Twitter and do Twitter music for us. What do you think of that?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And it was over. That was the extent of the acquisition talks. It went on for that afternoon. I was on a plane, San Francisco. They flew me to San Francisco. That morning, I woke up. I met Kevin at Twitter's HQ. I walked in, and he said, "I've got a surprise for you. Come to the boardroom," and there's Dick and Ev and the Twitter founders all there. And he's like, "I want you to explain Hunted for them." And I was like, "This is pretty intense situation. I would have liked a heads up." And then Kevin does this amazing intro. He does this thing of, so he was employee number 12 at Twitter, so he'd been there forever. And he does this intro like, "My job is to buy companies, guys, that, I'm head of acquisitions. For the last year, we've been scouring the world trying to find the best music startup in the world, who had the strongest tech and the right vibe for Twitter and blah, 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 and here they are." And I thought, well, shit, I can pull this off. And then just told my story of how it came. And it really resonated with them because theirs was an organic accident too. And they really loved the idea that we hadn't sat down trying to do this, that we'd stumbled on it and we fell into it and we got better at it. And they really loved just what we did. And they love Australians. Like everyone who's been to San Francisco and worked in tech knows how well Australians go over. They love our irreverent attitude, I suppose. So, and so that was it. It was overdone. We went through 6 weeks of backwards and forwards with lawyers, and but it went very well. And so then we went I moved my family from New York to San Francisco. We had a freaky 6 months at the start that Owen was involved with as well, where we went to the mission. We were in we were in stealth. So they built it really harrows me to even think back to this time. But they built this room on top of a mechanic's garage to hide us in because they were scared the labels were going to sue them too. Even as big as they were, they knew they couldn't they knew that we'd been streaming music illegally for 7 years and they didn't want to take that on with an IPO pending. So what they were going to do was negotiate with the labels over 6 months while they hid us. So for the first 6 months of Twitter, I never went there. And I worked in this garage, this crazy place, that they'd absolutely kitted out in the shittiest part of San Francisco they could imagine. Right in the Mission, just down from the Tenderloin, Hispanic gangs, the whole thing, can't go out at night. And this was our introduction to San Francisco, and didn't leave a very good taste in the team's mouth. But and then they also paired us. Anyway, I'm not going to get into details, but it was a very rough start. And then they decided that we had to launch the thing, like the day before they wanted to launch it. They told us we're going to launch it. And we'd been, oh, okay, what does that mean? Oh yeah, Dick's going on Good Morning America tomorrow at 4:30 to launch Twitter Music. Are you guys ready?
And this was a separate app, wasn't it?
We're not ready.
This was a standalone app separate to Twitter.
Yeah, that's right.
Point. Yep, and that's what you've been working on.
Yeah, so the backstory was Twitter has had a problem with products. They weren't shipping very quickly. Everyone's familiar with that. They still haven't solved that. But their way around that was they were going to think, well, why don't we just build separate apps, many apps? It's an ongoing debate in the product team. Do you have one app with many views or many apps? And ours was the first fairly disastrous experiment in the idea of a separate app. So we had no access to Twitter's teams, no access to their infrastructure, anything that they had. There was me, my team, and these 3 random Californians they pulled in to work in our team Anyway, the app, we launched the app. I'd launched some big apps in my time, not really. But Twitter Music, I ran that team. It leaked, and then everybody thought it was like the second coming. Like they thought it was going to be Spotify. It was going to be this amazing. No one knew what it was, but they all speculated. And then Dick was going to go on national TV and launch it. And all they told me is make sure it doesn't go down. I'm like, God, how do I not? Who goes through this? I have no concept of whether this will stay up or go down. Anyway, I delegated it to Michael. And so Michael had all the stress around keeping it up. And I don't think we slept for a day and a half. And at 4 a.m. San Francisco time, it went live. And we survived. And then they announced us inside. So we had an all hands at Twitter. And there was this crazy religious fervour thing they get going in America where they all chanting. And then the team came out and there was the launch. And then the next day we went to work and we were on this real high. We pulled it off. And then they canned the app the next day. And it was 6 months of work gone just overnight. And so the head of product came and saw me and said, Kevin's gone. The reason he's gone is he went ahead and built this app outside without talking to engineering and product. We don't do that this way, so we're pulling the app. And I was, all right, sure, welcome to Twitter. This is going to be fun. What do I do now? And so they put me in the product team. So I worked in Twitter's product team for him for about a year until I realised I'm in the wrong team here. The product team at Twitter, there was 2,000 people, 16 people at Twitter in the product team. We decide what Twitter should do. There's a research people who help us, and then we farm it out to design group and engineering group, and they go and build. So 2,000 people, there's 1,500 engineers there. That many programmers. To me, that was astounding there was that many programmers when I used the app. I go, where are they? What are they doing? What are we doing? Like, some of them are needed to keep it up, I get that. How many do we need to keep it up? And they were hiring 50 programmers a month at the point that we joined. I just couldn't believe the numbers. And I was in the product group, and I just couldn't fit in. I just didn't find a way to be effective within the product team. And so they moved me to engineering, and which was the best fun. I did a year in their machine learning group, and the team I had there they're all Guns, Stanford, MIT people, and I got an amazing crash course on machine learning from guys 20 years younger than me who were teaching me where everything was at. And
I've got a few questions coming in, so
yes.
Before we go too much further down, one of the questions was, did your other experiences in life help run the business side of We Are Hunted?
I didn't run the business side, Richard ran the business side. I led the engineering team.
Yeah.
So I'm a product guy who's a technical guy. So I ran the engineering group.
And you used your experience, I suppose, over the last...
Yeah. I'm very good at running an engineering team I think that's my skill.
Great. And this is another question and this may not be relevant, did you work out what qualitative measures are key metrics to determining a trend? So from a music perspective, how did you decide what those metrics were that you needed to build your algorithm around?
So how did the algorithm work? How do you work out how did we work out the best songs in the world right now? So the way we did it, which we had no idea how everyone else was doing it, and we just did it the way we thought how we would do it. So we it ended up the best way to do it was to sit on music blogs and to do what they call in the biz named entity recognition, to try and work out from free text of these music blogs, what song are they talking about? And when they describe that song, what terms and stuff are they describing that song for? And from that, you could do a straight count where you got, these are the most talked about songs right now, and then did basic trending stuff to say, this is more popular today than it was yesterday, and basically stats. But we'd worked out this really cool idea that we discovered about a year in, where we realised that music's like the stock market, and that was what our experience was. In that, there's a scoreboard at the end of every day, and it is sales or whatever. It was hugely lagging in music, so iTunes was our scoreboard. And so we're sitting on blogs talking about this coolest new music, and then in 6 months' time, or 3 months' time, some of this music, the best of it, will end up breaking through to the mainstream and appearing on music charts. So all we had to do was work out which of these music bloggers are best at picking which music will appear on the charts in 6 months' time. That was it. That was the whole thing. So we ended up developing an algorithm that did that, and people were amazed how good we were at picking what was popular. Well, we really weren't. These people were picking what was popular. We were very good at determining who was good at picking what was popular. And that was the whole hunted algorithm. And it was cool because it was online, and it was always getting smarter and better. And unless that blogger could keep up and keep on producing, they were replaced by a different blogger, which is the nature of how the industry works anyway. So that was our trick around the engineering part of it.
Now, because I want to get on to your current business,
yes.
Just to sum up at Twitter, biggest learnings?
I'm not good in big companies, which is a real shock to anyone who then does well at a startup. And the reason you're doing a startup is you're not very good at big companies. And then if you do amazingly well, then you'll never have to work for anyone again. If you don't do quite so well, like me, and you get second prize, you end up getting to go and work at another big company again, which doesn't really work. I have never been effective at big companies. I don't know why. I do kind of know why, but I'm not going to get into that.
Another time.
There's nothing to fear from them. I always had this mystique about Silicon Valley that they're smarter than we are. They must be, because look at all the cool shit they do. They must be much smarter than us. And then you get there and they're not. They're actually not that good. And you're really surprised. Like, you're shocked that they're not, that you get there and that the guys who are really good are not Americans. They're Australians, they're South Africans, we used to joke about at Twitter, the colonial brigade. Englishmen, Australians, South Africans were running Twitter and running Google. And wherever we went, they were. And they were basically bossing Chinese, Korean kids who were doing all the coding. All the management were old school colonials, and the untouchables, they were called, were the Silicon Valley, San Francisco people who lived above us. And they would swan in and tell us about whatever they spent their money on, and then they would go away. And I suppose it just completely removed the fear. And I also learnt that I have an amazing respect for anyone who can work at those places and ship, because it's insane to try and do it. And if you've got 3 guys who are as good, who work well as a team, Google can't touch you, Twitter can't touch you, Facebook can't touch you. They just can't move that quickly. They're like working at a bank, except they're cool. Basically. But it's hierarchies, meetings, timesheets, all the shit you get at banks, you get it there. There's no difference. So they've modified their business model. They appreciate they can't innovate, even though they say they can. So at 2,000 people at Twitter, there was 100 people in M&A, mergers and acquisitions. So they were buying, they bought, like Google buys a couple of 100 companies a year. Twitter was buying 50 companies a year. That's how they innovate. They wait for you guys to do it, and then they go and buy you and then put you in the team, and that's how they innovate.
Yeah. Tell us about what you're doing now. Tell us about Mawson Robotics.
So
Quick overview, and then I've got some questions and some audience questions on this one too.
So I came back from the States, really burnt out, really depressed. I'd come back and it was this really weird sensation because everybody in the Australian startup space was congratulating us and all this stuff. But it really felt like I always thought I could compete in the States when I finally got there, and I couldn't. I wasn't any good. And I felt like I'd got to the grand final and lost. And it had that feeling of I always wanted to test myself against the best in the world, and I just couldn't figure out the problem. And I became quite depressed about it. And it was just this weird feeling of everybody being so happy for me, and I feeling so devastated that I didn't do it. And I wasn't the person people were saying I was. And I met Dale at one point and gave him a reality check of what was going on. And a few people, my close friends all knew this was happening, but it was a very weird situation. Anyway, it took me a year to recover from that whole thing. And then I look back and I rationalise, and it wasn't such a bad thing. I did okay, and it was 10 years. And I look back and I'm like, shit, it was 10 years. And I started literally in my garage, and I just started to remember New York, craziness in New York, and lots of fun stuff. I got to meet, I met artists, and I went to Madison Square Garden, and I did, lots of stuff. I met everyone at Apple, and I met all the SoundCloud guys. And
so it must be hard to come back and then go, what do I do
no,
now?
I couldn't wait to get back. Could not wait to return to Australia.
Did you have a plan for when you came back?
No plan. Come home, get my kids back into an Australian school, to watch cricket, to listen to the ABC, to do Australian stuff. I just didn't settle. I didn't like it. I love New York, and I defy anyone not to live there and not adore New York. But I just missed Australian stuff, and I didn't want my kids to not experience Australia as well. So as soon as I could, the day I vested, I left. So I had to stay for 2 years to get my money, and then I was out. And the other guys are still there. They're all still at Twitter working there.
And Mawson?
Yeah, so I came back and I took a year off and did nothing, and kind of recovered and spent time with my wife and my family, which I hadn't done. And then I decided that, damn it, I'm going to build a music site, and it's going to be the best music site the world's ever seen. And that was my, fuck you all, I can do this. And then I looked around, and so I got deeply into it. And I had a few attempts, and I basically just recreated stuff I've done before. And I had this self-awareness that, yes, this is the same thing I've done before. And then I was at a meeting, and I was at dinner, and this girl said to me, she said, what do you do as you do it? And she said, I said, I do music stuff. And she said, so why do I like this song and not that song? And I went, I have no idea. And I then suddenly realised, I don't even understand what I do. Like I'd always looked at the problem as a programmer, not as a normal person. And then I thought that was an incredibly profound moment for me, that I just realised I was supposedly in the space an expert at music stuff, and I didn't know anything. And so I went down the rabbit hole and thought I'd better brush up on this. And then for 3 months I went down this crazy, obsessive rabbit hole of neuroscience. And so it turned out that the reason we like this song and not that song is at the very heart of the human condition. It's something we don't understand. It's something we will probably never understand. And it took me back to my early kind of medical days. I started to then, which I detested when I was doing medicine, but I started to open up my old textbooks, and I was reading about neuroscience, and I was reading about, and then I did a crash course in philosophy, which I recommend everybody does at some point. I'm now forcing my team to do it, where you go on, my crash course in philosophy is you go on YouTube, you go to School of Life, they make these 5-minute videos of every major philosopher, and in one day, you're not a philosopher, but you know, you have a better idea about why this is such an intractable problem. But then I had a whole series of epiphanies. I realised that the first was that if I succeed at this, and I build the best music site that's ever existed, then I have to move my family back to New York City and LA. And I thought, what the fuck am I doing this for? This is crazy. I just left there. Why would I do this? And so that was kind of depressing. But then I also realised that the next big breakthrough in music in my field will be when we make machines listen to music as we do, when they experience music as we do. Because at the moment, everything's a proxy for that. All the techniques we're using, collaborative filtering, if you like this song, you like this song, because people who look like you and listen to what you like that too. This is a proxy for what you actually like. So why do you like this song? What is about this song that makes you cry? And why do you not cry every time I play it? What is it? A computer can't do this until it experiences music like we do. And to me, that was my first epiphany of, holy shit, until the machine can experience music like we do, it will never go to this next step. And then I abstracted that out to, hey, maybe intelligence is experience. And to me, that was a very profound thing. And I was very excited. I'd made this major breakthrough that experience, intelligence, which is what I was in music, is related to experience. And then I Googled it and I thought, oh shit, philosophers knew this 100 years ago. And so, not so profound, but I was then able to read all this stuff. And then I went through a whole series of epiphanies in that space. I realised straight away that the way that I'd seen computers was completely wrong. I'd seen it as computers are bigger and they're getting smaller, which they are, but that's not it. They're slow and they're getting faster, which they are, but that's not important either. They're dumb and they're getting smarter. And the reason they're getting smarter is they're experiencing more of the world. And I went, holy shit. Then I look around and there's people teaching cars to drive. I was teaching computers to drive. And I went, oh, how do they do that? And it turned out they did that because they had the same breakthrough. That they realised that you don't teach a computer to drive a car by programming the manual. You teach a computer, because that's not how we drive. What's the manual tell you? The rules of the road. It doesn't teach you how to drive. The only way we know how to drive is to actually drive. Intelligence comes from experience. And so then I look, how are they making it? And I realised, oh, they're on the same path. And then I discovered Heideggerian AI, which is around, he'd said, this Nazi in the 20s had said exactly that phrase. The best model of the world is the world itself. Intelligence will be derived from experience. Machines won't become intelligent until they experience the world as we do. And then I realised my whole field's about to jump. It's going to go from boxes to mobile phones. This is a robot. This is the smartest robot that's ever been made. It can experience the world. What's that?
It's recording us right now.
It knows where it is in time and space. It can sense the world. It can move out. You can imagine these computers going from tape going in to being connected on networks at universities to then the World Wide Web to mobile phones, and it's experiencing more of the world and it's getting intelligent. It's getting more intelligent. And holy shit, they're going to take it and put it in a car and they're going to teach it to drive a car. And I thought, if they can teach these to drive cars, what else can we teach them to do? What can I teach them to do? And then I also then realised someone in Australia is going to build a robotics company over the next 10 years. There's going to be 3 or 4 of them. And they're going to be really successful because if intelligence is experienced, there are some things you can only experience in Australia. If you want to build a robot to control the environment on the Great Barrier Reef or on reefs, where would you do it? You'd do it here. If you were going to build a machine that was going to monitor livestock, you would do it here. There were some things that we should do because our environment and our experiences are different to California, Germany, Japan, and China. And so I realised, there's going to be a robotics company in 10 years' time, one or more, that could be Australian, that can create jobs for all of us here in tech, that should be, and should focus on things that are uniquely Australian, and we'll export that to the world. There are reefs all around the world, but there's not reefs in California and Silicon Valley. And I knew from everyone I knew in machine learning and Twitter that they're all headed towards horizontal applications. They're working on cars, they're working on vacuum cleaners, they're working on drones, stuff that wasn't specific. And then, so I thought, if not me, then who? And then if not now, then when? Maybe if I start this robotics company now, in 10 years' time, I might be one of the 3. So that's when I decided to do it. And then I went and saw my investor, Graham, and said, hey man, they're going to build robotics companies that are going to be massive. I know robotics has been around for a while, but I think we're right on the tipping point of them getting a lot smarter really quickly. Because...
Can I ask a question at this point? And I've asked it once already, we'll see if I understand it better the second time around. How do you teach a computer and let it experience? You're saying intelligence comes from experience. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's early days, but there was a thing invented in the 80s, and I'm going to bow to the roboticists and QT in the room here before I embarrass myself. But there was, neural nets were developed in the 80s. They were kind of cool. Neural net is a way of, it's a system that mimics, it's a system that works kind of like the human brain. That's the idea. That it's all based on the same model that our human brain is. And the way it learns is essentially, it tries to identify features, and from those features build representations of the real world from those. I'm not sure we're learning yet. Peter would know more than me. I'm not sure we really do learn yet, but I know we're starting to.
I don't think we don't learn like people do yet.
No.
We can demonstrate pretty amazing performance.
That's right.
By showing a computer a lot of stuff. This is a dog, this is a cat, this is a chair. Show it millions and billions of those. The web's full of them. And he can find the correlations. It does much better than people.
That's right. And it's not statistics. And I'd worked in statistics effectively within machine learning for a long time. I don't think they're truly learning, but it's coming. And when it does, it opens up a new world. Machines that can learn, it's a new type of tool. We are close to tools that are intelligent is a real game changer. We've been making tools for 100,000 years, the first stone tools, and in the last 50 years, we've started to get much better at making them. And we're about to arrive at a point where tools can make other tools. And if that happens, that's a complete shift in the evolution of us. And that's going to happen in our lifetime, which is quite a scary thing to think about. And so I decided that, I'm going to do a robotics company. I don't know anything about robotics, but I do sense that the timing might be right. And so my plan is, over the next 10 years, can I get a group of good men together who I trust and I know, and can we build a major Australian robotics company over the next 10 years? And I've never had a vision like that. I can imagine what it is and what it looks like, what it will do. And we have this idea that if we're going to build a truly great robotics company, it should solve great problems. So suddenly, if you've got this tool that's never existed before, maybe we can use it to solve problems that in the past have been very difficult. And so, as a Queenslander, specifically here, I look around and whether you're green or not green, our economy is shifting dramatically, and it has big implications for us and our families. We're going to lose the coal industry. It's going to halve in 10 years. Whether, for whatever reason, the world has spoken and we're going green and renewables are the future. No matter what your politics are, that's just what's going to happen. And what that means for us, it's a $20 billion industry. It's going to halve. That's going to be bad news for Queensland over the next 10 years. How do we pick up the slack? If you look what's second and third, tourism's $5 billion industry here. It used to be 8. It's 5 now because of the dollar, all that. But it's also a big problem is the reef's dying. We've lost half of it in the last 30 years, the scientists tell me. And if that's true, then that is, and it drives 80% of our tourism. How are we going to double tourism? We have to save the reef. We have to first change the meme that it's dying and then actually do things to save it. And as it turns out, robotics are probably our best shot at that. There's 3 things that are killing the reef. Well, it's debated, and I'm no scientist who knows this, but I'm told from guys who do that there is runoff happening, stuff that causes outbreak of crown of thorns, and there's global change. Crown of thorns are the easy one. Well, not easy, but we know they eat the reef. They've eaten half of it, and they're continuing to eat it. Can any of us imagine in 10 years' time there'll be automated machines that can go out, hunt and kill these things, or control them, or whatever? I think that's a lot. We'll do that. Someone will do that. Why not us do that? So, and if we do that, that's a very valuable thing. Because there's reefs, as it turns out, there's crown of thorns outbreaks all around the world, and they'll want to pay for that too.
So we've got a few questions.
Yes.
I'm going to cut you off there for a second because we are running quite short on time here.
That's
so
right.
We'll get through a few questions and then I've got a few more to go. Okay. What barriers do you expect to hit moving from a software background to a hardware space? Or do you not see it like that?
No, not at all. To me, I'm still in the software company. I wanted to call it Mawson Intelligent Machines, but that sucked. So robots are the carrier for the intelligence. I've been working in intelligence for a decade. I'm still in that space.
Yeah.
I need to, but if I'm seeing it the right way, they'll become intelligent because my software is going to be carried by machines that let it experience the world.
Yeah.
So I have to be in robotics now.
What are the skills, and I think you may have answered a bit of this, but what are the skills that transition from Hunted to Mawson, and what are the ones you've had to learn?
Well, it turns out these problems aren't new, and I've been going around for the last 6 weeks. I've visited a whole lot of robotics labs around Australia and met incredibly talented people who are already working on these problems. I'm not going to be the person who solves this, but I might be able to convince people with money to give these people money to solve this, because people have reluctance to give government and union money, which is probably fair. I don't know. But they don't seem to have any problem giving money to me, which is really weird. So maybe the reason these things aren't being solved is because people like us aren't solving them. That maybe if I ask people with money and explain why this is coming and why it's a great opportunity, that I might be able to help solve them. I don't think I'm going to build them. I'm hoping I don't have to. I'm hoping that people like you... Yeah. There's... QT's got an amazing team. They've been working on Codspot now for a year. They've been funding it themselves. They see the same problem. They see exactly the same solution. And they've been doing really well with it. And I went to University of Technology in Sydney, 6-year roboticists doing lots of cool stuff in the same space. I've been to University of Tasmania and been out to UQ, and there's all these really talented people who are here in Australia and doing great work and as good as anyone I've met anywhere.
So how can you collaborate with them?
I don't know. That's the bit I'm working out.
Keep us posted. Why the name Mawson?
To be honest, I wanted a name that meant something that didn't mean anything yet. So it meant something. So he's one of our most famous explorers and scientists. He was first Australian to the South Pole, all this crazy stuff he did, which is kind of humbling. I feel slightly embarrassed that we're called that. But he's an inspiration and aspiration for us as a company as well. We feel like we're going to somewhat exploring the future and going somewhat to the frontiers in a kind of lame, nerdy way, not quite like he did. And really and I had a few different names, and then I had a meeting with Graham, and Graham said, so what are we calling this thing? And I said, Mawson Robotics. And he said, I love it. I can see it I can see it written on a big wall somewhere, on the side of a building somewhere. Yeah. And that's it, that'll do. I had 3, but I didn't get past the first one.
We know startups aren't for everyone. How would you go about encouraging the right students to get into it, given the support for youth entrepreneurship in Brisbane?
I don't think it's a choice. I think I can't do anything else. And if you can't do anything else, then sorry, you have to do it. There's no way around it. You will never find contentment, happiness, anything in your life if you're driven. If you're driven to do these things, if you're driven to do it, you've got to do it. But if you're not willing to, I haven't. It's the extremes. I've had amazing experiences, but I've also had incredible lows of which
It's the ride, isn't it?
Yeah, it's those extremes that make it, and that's not for everybody. Like, if you don't like roller coasters, you shouldn't go and do it.
Do you think there will ever be a larger VC, angel, PE presence in Australia?
Yes,
or
indeed.
have we missed the boat for shoot first, aim later investment?
I'm a believer that in 100 years' time we will be the new USA. I think we're at least 100 to 200 years behind the evolution of them, and hopefully we won't cock it up like they are.
Do you have any concerns about taking on the big guns within the robotics industry? Boston Dry?
No, not at all. I think that there are things here, as long as I don't take on cars, which I'm not, or take on vacuum cleaners, which we won't. If we do things that are associated with livestock, agriculture, marine studies, anything Australians should be bloody good at, then we'll be fine. Because how does someone in California without a reef compete against people who have a reef? I don't get how they are any better than we are.
Yeah. I had a question here whether you're taking resumes. What's your team look like?
My team's sitting there. There's 2 of them. Sure.
Get in touch. Okay. Do you think we will develop conscious robots? Just to finish up on that big question. Ooh. If so, how far away are they?
I wouldn't be surprised if they already are, to be fair. I don't think we know. We don't even know if dogs are conscious. We don't even know if obvious shit's not conscious. We don't know if trees are conscious. So whether a machine's conscious, they can't even define what that is. The good thing is, Intelligence is not consciousness. So we can build things that appear to be intelligent, that are intelligent, that who gives a shit if they're conscious or not? You know what I mean? I don't understand. Yeah.
How far into your journey are you now?
We're 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
No.
8 weeks, right?
No, it's less than that. 4 days, isn't it? No, literally, I have been doing this for 6 months. When I first... it's not easy to say these things in public. I am slightly embarrassed to try and put my hand up and say, we're going to try and save the Great Barrier Reef. Like, it feels, why should we be embarrassed to say things like that? I feel, but I do. And I've been working up, we've got other bigger goals than that, surprisingly.
Can you share any of them here with us tonight?
Well, my background's in cattle, and if we're going to double the cattle industry in Australia, which is currently at 6 billion to 12, we have to break the cycle of drought. That's the obvious next thing to do. That sounds impossible to me. How do you break the cycle of drought? It's a natural thing. But as it turns out, atmospheric water generation and other techniques have been used by the military for quite a while. We're on the break. If there's breakthroughs in energy creation, there will be breakthroughs in water. The two are tied. If we can flood the outback, we've got a massive opportunity for generations of Australians where we can feed Asia. There's 1 billion people sitting on our doorstep. We have a desert country. If we can solve the water problem somehow, then we can create an amazing wealth. We can pick up the slack. Can we turn coal mines into reservoirs? What's the options here to try and solve the water problem?
Definitely some big problems to solve.
Yes, indeed.
I'd like to thank you very much for joining us tonight. We hopefully have all taken away some inspiration from what you've shared with us here, and I think we've all got something to think about after hearing from you. So I'd like to present you with this very small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you for being involved.